Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm blueandgold.com's Mike Singer, and I'm joined, as always, by Patrick Engel and Lou Somogyi. This is our Irish Huddle live. So we have a YouTube live audience here. You can, of course, watch us back via YouTube and podcast version as well. We don't forget about you folks. So please like this video. We want to get to 300 likes on this video. So please hit the thumbs up button. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. And for our podcast audience, please give us a 5-star review if you haven't yet on Apple Podcasts. You can, of course, follow us on Twitter. My handle is at rivals_singer. Follow me for all recruiting information on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Follow Lou at BGI_Lou Somogyi, SOMOGYI. You can follow Patrick at Patrick Engel _ENGEL, and of course our staff handle at BGI News. Quick note for our podcast listeners, since it's a short week, Thanksgiving's on Thursday, the game's on Friday, this will be our lone podcast of the week. And for our YouTube live audience, please consider leaving us a super chat. This is basically your way of, if you like what you see, is giving us a tip. Just drop us a few bucks. It goes out a long way to helping out our channel. All right, housekeeping items out of the way. Let's get into the nitty gritty, guys. So Brian Kelly had his press conference today. And I think one of the more notable items was talking about the offensive line status. Jarrett Patterson go out. Tommy Kramer is out. So Patrick, first, just kind of set the scene. What happened, and what are the replacements really?
Yeah, so a very eventful bye week or open date. Well, that's technically the proper term for it. But anyway, yeah, since Notre Dame's last game, we have learned about two injuries. Obviously, last week we had heard about Jarrett Patterson in time. He's out for the season, had surgery. That's a foot issue. But Notre Dame's going to be without right guard Tommy Kramer for Friday at North Carolina. He had an emergency appendectomy. By all accounts, as Brian Kelly told us today, went well. They're thinking he'll go back to football activities next week. So, not ruling out the idea of him playing December 5th at Syracuse at this point. Obviously, we'll see what happens when he gets back into practice. But we know the starters, and I know we discussed this last week, and more or less it has been now both of the guys that were our main uh, candidates there to play center and replace Jared Patterson are going to get in the lineup. Zeke Correll, the backup who has been Patterson's backup and has been working exclusively at center since he got on campus in 2019. He's going to start for Patterson at center. Josh Lugg, the swing man, play any spot on the line you want him to. He's slotted in there at right guard for Kramer. He pinch hit for Kramer at the very end of the Georgia Tech game on Halloween. Of course, played right tackle in the last 5 games of last year. So that's how that has unfolded, just to kind of set the situation here. And really, I can't say that I'm all that surprised in that. Okay, you have opening at guard, or it could have been tackle, or really anything. Lug was going to be there just because he's the sixth lineman and the most experienced guy and someone you can trust. And Corral, I think, and we don't know, and I still would have posited and still thought like, okay, he should be the guy you put at center, and that was the case even before Kramer's issue here. But can't really say that I'm surprised that you want to see, okay, this is that future center per se. Let's just give him a look now. He's repped there exclusively, highly regarded guy, and for someone who's obviously been a backup, and you think of all the continuity on this offensive line, had played in pinch hit in 6 games in between last year and this year. So not coming in completely green, like, oh, never stepped on a college field before. But of course, certainly doesn't have the 21 career starts that Jared Patterson has. So yeah, I really can't say that I'm surprised here. And that Notre Dame took the route it did here with Zeke Correll and Josh Love.
Lou, your thoughts on this new starting five? I mean, I think the first thing that jumps out to me is that you You typically correlate tackles as being taller, right? And you got Josh Luck at right guard. It's nearly 6'7", and Robert Hainsey's just nearly 6'5". That's a I think height can often or length people often say is height, but oftentimes it's not. Just because you're 6'7" does maybe you don't have the longest arms, or just because you're 6'4" doesn't mean you don't have those long arms. But that was something that kind of popped out to me. But Lou, do you think this was the right move? Zeke at center and Luck at right guard.
It seemed the most logical. I figured Lug was going to be in there one way or another, and he's still listed right now as the backup for Zeke Correll in case something happens to him at center. He took some reps there, I remember, in the spring of 2019, and at that time I thought, gosh, he's like Alex Bars in that he's played virtually or lined up at every position along the offensive line at some point, whether it was in practices or games. So he has that same type of versatility. I really don't look at him as a backup. Last year at this time, first series of the Virginia Tech game on November 2nd, Robert Hainsey went down with the ankle injury. Josh Luck took over in that game, and the final five as well. They won all those games, so he performed well there. Probably tackle would be considered his natural spot, but like I said, like in Alex Bars, he can function most anywhere along that line. With Corral, he's sort of in the position that Jared Patterson was in last year, coming in as a sophomore starter. It's like, hey, where did this guy come from? He was a left tackle recruited at Notre Dame. He was about 290, and that's about where Zeke is right now because he was redshirted as a freshman. He weighed, according to Brian Kelly, about 265 pounds. So he needed a new coat of armor in the college strength and conditioning program. And he's listed at 295 on the depth chart. But as the course of the season goes on, according to Kelly, he's probably more so in the 285, 290 range, which is where Patterson was last year. So in the same way where Jared Patterson made that debut kind of out of nowhere, at Louisville to open the 2019 season. This is going to be kind of like that version for Zeke Corral, he was the number 114 ranked recruit on Rivals back in 2019. Very much sought after. Clemson was looking at him. So, they're not exactly throwing somebody in there on a wing and a prayer. He's been considered the center of the future. And I think there is even some speculation that eventually with Eichenberg graduating at left tackle and Robert Hainsey at right, that Jared Patterson would move out to his more natural tackle position later on. And maybe this is kind of the start to it.
Now, guys, how are we feeling about this unit for the rest of this season? Like, Patrick, I'll throw this to you. Guys coming back or not coming back? Just what's the vibe? Because obviously this offensive line unit's arguably been the best in the entire country this year. What does it look like now?
Yeah, I guess I'm curious to see what, if anything, happens after you have a game with this five, and then let's say, for the sake of the conversation, that Kramer's back for that December 5th game. All right, is it where Corral's at center? That's been his thing. They're just going to keep him there? Or, all right, Josh Lugg is the experienced sixth lineman. They're going to stick him at center and go with that. So we'll see what happens with that. If you go with Josh Lugg, I would imagine that's prompted by just wanting the experience, or especially even more, is that shows out where communication and things, for whatever reason, if they do at all, prove to be something that the coaches didn't like out of the offensive line on Friday when they play North Carolina. Obviously, that's we'll see what happens there. But I think that's, I guess, one thing you look at if they just decide, let's just go with a bunch of these older guys who communicate well with each other. And as they get into the postseason and these bigger games, and that's where you want that. But at that point, Corral would have a couple of more starts under his belt. And again, this was the guy they'd been kind of grooming for that role. So yeah, I would feel good about it in the sense that Kramer is not a long-term absence, as it sounds right now. And at that point, okay, you're still having 4 or 5. I mean, like, let's just even go back to the beginning of the year, let's say. if you just didn't have a Jarrett Patterson and you were putting Corral in there for the start of the year, or really, I think you could say this about any one position, but it's center in particular. What the conversation around the offensive line wouldn't have been that much different, right? It'd still be, I don't know, 90 something career starts heading into the year. And then, I mean, but at least by now, those four guys, if you were just to have had Eichenberg, Banks, Kramer, and Hainsey, would have been 8 games into the year, well over 100. So that talking point is still kind of there, and can be with Lug if you put him there going forward. But even then, like it with a newish starter in Corral, let's say for the ACC championship or whatever bowl game or playoff game or whatever that they end up in, the talking point is still this line is experienced, this line is good. I don't really think that would change too much. I mean, of course, Corral hasn't made a start. We'll see what happens, but I will work under the assumption that he's not a liability until it actually happens on the field.
Sure. Good points. Yeah, a couple things. We're going to now get into some receiver talk. Braden, Lindsay, Brian Kelly talked about. So in his press conference, again, a couple things to make you aware of. Please leave us a super chat. Again, this is just your way. If you like our show, you watch some of our recruiting videos, podcasts, whatever it may be on YouTube, this is a great opportunity for you to just click the little $ button there, as you see on the screen. Throw us a couple bucks, really helps support our channel. And also have on the top of the screen there, it says promo code Nike75. That deal is if you subscribe to blueandgold.com using promo code Nike75, you'll get a $75 Nike gift code to use in store or online, and you also get a 25% discount to blueandgold.com for the first year of your annual subscription. If you have any questions about that, you can email me directly, msinger@blueandgold.com. Penciled in. That's what Brian Kelly had to say about Braden Lindsay. He didn't appear on the depth chart, but look, take the depth chart with a grain of salt. I mean, sometimes they update it to perfection, sometimes they didn't. Like they had the O-line updated with those injuries. Brian Kelly said Braden Lindsay, you can pencil him in to see him on Friday. So, Lou, what would you expect from Braden Lindsay? I mean, the receiver core finally kind of feels, I'll say, established. I don't know if anyone agrees with me on that, but with Ben Skronik, with Javon McKinley, and with Avery Davis, feels like a pretty solid trio. Where does Braden Lindsay fit in?
He's going to be a niche player. Sort of like where he fit in last year, most of the season, until kind of at the end when he started establishing a rhythm. But when you're a speed guy like Lindsay, and you've had issues with the hamstring from pretty much the outset of the season, that explosiveness, it's not only physical, but sometimes it can become mental as well. It's like, okay, is it going to snap again? I expect he'll be in the lineup on occasion, but as you mentioned, Mike, they have found a really nice rhythm with that trio with McKinley, Skowronek, and Davis, both as receivers, as blockers, just in the overall continuity of the offense. Going into that Clemson game on November 7th, probably the number one topic was, gosh, can the receivers emerge and just not hurt the team? Well, they combined for 13 catches, 207 yards. Davis catches the deep one. McKinley catches a couple of deep ones. Skowronek makes a clutch grab here and there. And then the following week against Boston College, that trio combines for 181 yards. There's not a Will Fuller or a Michael Floyd figure there who's going to dominate. But as a group, collectively, I think they have found their legs together. And as Brian Kelly noted, there's a toughness element to them as well, because this is a physical identity with this program, and that includes the blocking as well. Braden, he's been on and off again with the practices. He hasn't been able to establish any kind of rhythm. So I'm not expecting, 40, 30, maybe even 20 snaps necessarily against North Carolina, if that, because it's going to be still a multi-tight end base, I think, with their offense that they want to emphasize. And they have really found, I think, a good rhythm with that trio of receivers we mentioned, both with size, the ability to get downfield, the ability to run after the catch as Avery Davis has. They have a little bit of everything there. And Lindsay can supplement it a little, some there, but I'm not expecting, an inordinate amount of snaps, but I could see a reverse or just take it down the field on a go route, maybe scare the bejabbers out of a secondary that has been really, really decimated since the preseason. So how much he'll play, who knows? But I think they have established a really strong continuity with the trio that they have there.
Yeah, Mike, I'll use your word. I think the group is established. And I don't know. I mean, just when you're looking over what they've done and the snap distribution and whatnot, you just kind of look through that and say, all right, well, who are you taking the snaps from for Lindsay to get out there, whether that's a tight end or one of merely the three main guys in Javon McKinley, Bennett Skowronek, and Avery Davis? I don't really know. I mean, I don't know that the upside of this group is that of 2019 or 18, even with the Ben Skowronek red zone contested catch bailout emergence and thing that he gave them against Boston College, and that you would think he'd be able to do going forward, just going off the track record at Northwestern, and certainly just the skill that was on display on against Boston College. But yeah, I'm just not sure that you want to disrupt that when to me, it seems like the strength of this receiving core is that everyone has a clear, defined type of role, and the entire offense operates within that, where you don't have any of these guys doing things that they're not good at, and everything that they do is built something around their strength. You get Skowronek contested catches, Davis in position to run after the catch, McKinley, who's been a better than expected, at least to me, threat after the catch. So it's just hard to think about disrupting that too much. So again, look, Lindsay brings what he does in speed, and we'll see exactly what that looks like coming off the hamstring injury, or at least the first game back. I think even in my first year here in Lou and your 11 years of covering Brian Kelly injury updates, to take on the low end or the lower estimated end of whatever he expects for a player in his first game back. But yeah, it's just kind of hard to see too much of a thing that juggles up what's a pretty established and right now smooth operating thing. There hasn't been a receiver, like a wide receiver, I'm not counting tight ends here, outside of that McKinley, Davis, Skowronek trio to catch more than 2 passes in a game since Lindsay did it against Florida State. That was a long time ago. So, and since then, I mean, the group has only gotten more cohesive and healthy. So yeah, I have a hard time just kind of picturing that kind of trio breaking up too much.
Isn't it amazing how the fascination is always with the guys who aren't playing? In the first half of the season, it was Kevin Austin, and now in the back half of the season, it's Braden Lindsay. Sometimes it's more so about who's not playing than appreciating who is excelling right now. And that's not to say that Lindsay can't, but I think so much of it is right now between the ears too. It's mental, because when you have that type of speed, but you have a hamstring as an issue, it just lingers sometimes. For a while, can I really let loose and cut loose? And when you think too much about that, how much does that diminish maybe some of your effectiveness? Just getting that explosiveness, getting that burst off the line, etc., and even timing, as far as how much are you able to really practice and establish that rhythm with your quarterback.
Yeah, it's pretty funny, Lou, about the guys who aren't playing. I mean, what was our offseason discussion, and the general offseason discussion was Austin and Lindsay are kind of a big thing, right? I mean, so what's like, what would you have thought, or I would have thought if anyone had told us then, like, oh yeah, those guys are going to have, what do they have, less than 10 combined catches off the top of my head? I think so. If it's
I
if
think
it's
it,
if it's
I
10,
think
not more
it's
than that.
yeah, I think it's
But
8.
either way, yeah, that sounds right. And I mean, if you had told us, or certainly any of the good folks on our message board, or you just thrown it out there on Twitter, uh, that was going to be the case, like, you know, people, like, there would have been a lot of panic. And I mean, I would have understood it, and I might have even participated in it. So I guess it just kind of goes to show maybe our expectations were a little bit off, or just not discussed on exactly what McKinley and Davis and Skoranek could do. But still, I guess it just kind of speaks to what those guys have given as far as a steadying presence, even if, all right, none of them is going to be a Chase Claypool second round pick and blow everybody out of the water with combine testing numbers.
Appreciate Michael Ryan for the $5 super chat. If anyone else wants
Shouts to
to, yeah, appreciate it, Mike. Hit the little dollar sign. This is for our YouTube live audience. That really goes a long way in helping our channel. Before we move on, I just want to say, what else did this trio need? I mean, to put some respect on their name. I mean, they went out there and dominated against Clemson, Notre Dame's biggest win in 27 years, and it's still like people talking about the receivers, like it's just an inferior unit. I'm like, would you rather them look amazing against Louisville and look crappy against Clemson rather than the opposite? I don't know, but that's
pretty clear.
That's rather here nor there. Burning question times, guys, and then a couple segments afterwards, and we're going to get to the YouTube chat for those participating with us live. Here's our first burning question. What does Notre Dame try and take away? UNC's running backs and run game, or Sam Howell and his weapons? We will go to Mr. Somogyi first.
I don't think there's any question with any defensive coordinator. You got to be able to control the line of scrimmage first and foremost and take away the run. If I tell you that Team A threw for 350 yards and ran for 50, or would you rather take it that they ran for 350 and passed for 50? I think 10 times out of 10, you say, oh man, if you give up 350 yards rushing, you're going to get crushed because you're just dominating the game, dominating the line of scrimmage. And so much of when you have two backs, the caliber of Williams and Carter, that may be the best 1-2 punch in the country right now. Both are averaging over 100 yards a game. Both are averaging over 7 yards a carry. Notre Dame's game is about establishing a physicality in the line of scrimmage. If that is taken away from them and North Carolina is able to run, that could be a difficult afternoon. If you're forcing them to just pass and pass, you're playing right into Clark Lea's hands. That's not to say that they won't have their share of success running the ball, but if you're getting into the 200-yard rushing area, this team is giving up only 85 yards rushing a game. So if you can find that happy medium where you limit them to about 120, 130 yards and force them to just become more single-minded in their game, then you're playing into Clark Lea's hand. And also, I think Brian Kelly made a point of this. So much of their strength is the run-pass option. And that doesn't work if you don't have that first element, the run, functioning. So I think it all goes foremost on that. You saw that against Clemson too. I mean, DJ throws for a record against Notre Dame, but it still came down to they had to kick 4 field goals, 2 of them in the red zone, and that kept Notre Dame within striking distance. North Carolina is going to score. They're averaging 48 points a game in their last 6 and 43.4 for the season. They're going to put up points, but it's really about damage control. And the damage control begins with just keeping the running game in check.
Yeah, I'm with you, Lou. And even if we remove the opponent for a minute, and just regardless of opponent, I would just say I trust Notre Dame's run defense more than its passing defense. And that's mainly to say that they've been just really good at not allowing a lot of chunk runs, and really good on third down because it puts you into 3rd and longs, because the first down success rate or explosiveness or yards per play is really bad. I mean, for offenses, that is. look back in the Pitt game, and I know say what you want about Pitt's running game. That was a rough watch. They did nothing on first down. Clemson, a lot of those stuffs or TFLs for Travis Etienne, those were on first down. So I'm with you here in that I would just want to make it one-dimensional there just because I think it plays into Notre Dame's strength. But also, I mean, you mentioned the record that DJ Uyunglele threw yardage-wise against Notre Dame. You kind of forgot about it, or it didn't really feel as much just because it felt like the only thing they really had in that sense. And I mean, look, you can live with 400 yards or 350 yards or whatever it is. You assume that it's going to be some pretty big number. If the efficiency or success rate isn't as good as you would expect given the raw yardage total, or the red zone defense and red zone scoring opportunities are not what you would want to see from a North Carolina offensive standpoint if you're North Carolina, and the yards per attempt if that's something a little lower. That's something all Notre Dame can very much live with. And yeah, you're right. It's damage control, and I would think that Notre Dame is just geared better to stop North Carolina's running game.
Well, one of my favorite stats I always like to throw out, Patrick, that 3-9 Notre Dame team in 2007 at the end of the season, and this is the job of sports information publicity directors, they pointed out this was one of the greatest Notre Dame pass defenses in history because they allowed only so-and-so yards. In fact, it finished number 2 in the country at 3-9. You know why they finished number 2 in the country? Because teams were able to run on them. They ran at will on them, and all they did in the second half with those 33-3 or other leads, well, let's just run the clock and don't have to pass and everything. So the yardage was kept out. So that's where you can live with people throwing for 300 yards, or Steve Walsh threw for 424 against Notre Dame. DJ threw for 439. I'm talking Steve Walsh in 1988, number 1 Miami. And it didn't feel that way because they had 7 turnovers. And the same way, you didn't get that same feeling with Clemson. If you're running for 300, 350 yards, it's going to be a long, long afternoon. That's where it all begins on defenses. You got to be able to control that line of scrimmage.
Yeah, what is it? Lies, damn lies, and stats. There, put that in the dictionary next to 3-9 team.
Of course, this game is on Friday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC. Spread is Notre Dame 5 points. -5. Notre Dame's 5-point favorite. Over-under is at 66, so Vegas sees this as a fairly high-scoring game and a close one as well. Second burning question, can Notre Dame's field corner position that's in flux still hold up? So in that depth chart that was released on Monday, the or that's been attached with Clarence Lewis and Trick Bracey was removed, and Clarence Lewis is just now the starter. This is a true freshman, unheralded 3-star recruit from New Jersey, now the starting corner, and it's his job to lose now. So, Patrick, we'll go to you first. Do you think that the combination of Lewis and Bracey in that field spot hold up?
Yeah, this isn't exactly the best time of your schedule to have that field corner spot being the one spot on the defense that's still kind of undefined, in flux, or at least just going based off what the coaches have said, or the snap distribution says is still kind of the thing that they're sorting out or not quite comfortable with. A guy who just goes up there and plays every snap like Nick Mcloud does at the boundary corner. So yeah, I'd be at least curious or concerned or something in between those two words about what Notre Dame can do there. I mean, just like DJ Uyunglele made Notre Dame's field corners stressed with his ability to hit those far side of the field outbreaking routes or far side of the field vertical routes, Sam Howell can absolutely do that as well. So I would, that's kind of something to watch, where if that's just a thing that's open for Howell most of the game, he can make a lot of those throws. And that wasn't something you really worry about against, say, I don't know, Duke or Louisville or Florida State or anybody and really before the Clemson part of the schedule. So yeah, that would be one thing where I think North Carolina might be just looking on film or just looking at the overall experience, especially seeing Clarence Lewis out there as a freshman. Like I think he's had plenty of good moments and overall played well, but it's a freshman corner that you're looking at if you're Carolina offensive coordinator Phil Longo to really try and exploit and see what you can get there as far as getting some openings and some space and separation for your receivers over there, and how is good enough to make you pay for it.
Yeah, it seems the trend definitely since that Clemson game has been toward Clarence Lewis because against Clemson, I believe Tariq Bracy played early on. They hit the deep pass there, and then the final. I think if I recall correctly, Tariq had only 8 snaps, and Clarence
None of them were
Lewis
after
had
that
70.
deep touchdown. You're right.
He had 70 or so. So, yeah, I'm wondering, do you go to more of a 3 safety look too? Because one of the things emphasized by Brian Kelly as well, as in addition to stopping the run, is limiting those big chunk yardage plays downfield. Last year, when USC came in with its very prolific passing attack, they used 3 safeties, Kyle Hamilton, Alohi Gilman, and Jalen Elliott, pretty much the duration of the game. I think they were there together that entire time. Now, the problem was, even though Marcus Stepp had some big runs, is USC was considered a bit one-dimensional. That's not the case with North Carolina. They're throwing for over 320 yards passing, and they're also averaging exactly the same amount of rushing yards, 233.5, as Notre Dame is, both 14th in the country. So, you play too far back, and then they hit you with the run or try to emphasize that aspect of the game. So it's a lot on the plate for Clark Lee.
I don't know if we'll see 3 safeties just based on pure personnel. In that, I don't know. Do you trust DJ Brown or Houston Griffith more than you do one of those field corners that has played a lot of snaps for you? I'm not sure, but to your point, Lou, I think that going back to that USC game, I know you had 27 points and USC nearly stormed back, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, they almost lost this game. How is that a good defensive game?" I mean, if you look at, they took away exactly what they wanted to take away, and that make you run to beat them. Obviously, not the case here, but that's we're talking about a different team, of course. Michael Pittman had what I believe 0 catches through 3 quarters, or if he had 1, it was very late in the 3rd quarter. So as far as 27 points and whatever the yardage total was doesn't look great, but that game was a thing where they took away one of USC's biggest strengths. If that kind of script plays out, where North Carolina has, say, their version of that would be 0 runs of 20-plus yards until late in the 4th quarter, or even if it's in a passing game where one of Daz Newsome or De'Ami Brown doesn't catch a pass until the second half or something. I would feel very good if anything like that happens, that Notre Dame's going to come out on top.
We'll go to burning question number 3, and then we will a couple more segments, and then we're going to our YouTube chat. Will Notre Dame get to use its usual patient, control the ball offense, or will the game script in North Carolina make this a faster pace of a game? We'll go to Lou first.
No, I look for Notre Dame. Brian Kelly has emphasized this all season, and I don't see a change here. We are who we are. The identity has been fully established. I mean, how many times over the years have we heard, I just wish Notre Dame had an identity to it. And usually the translation for that is, I wish they would do what I want them to do. And they have established their identity. They did that in the first couple of weeks of the season. We're going to be physical. We're going to have multi-tight ends. We're going to control the ball, and we're just going to physically pound you and wear you out by the 4th quarter. And that worked so successfully against Clemson as well. Why mess with success here? You don't get cute at this point of the season. And sometimes one of the dangers of a bye week can be that it's like you feel compelled that we got to add something new here. We got some extra time. It's stick with what brought you here. Maybe you can throw in a wrinkle here or there. Fine. But you got to the number 2 ranking in the country for a reason. And what you're operating has been very successful. I think the number one thing they want to be able to do is just limit the touches for North Carolina, control the possession. And sometimes with teams like that who are used to being so prolific, there becomes an antsiness. The more you're on the sideline, the more they feel like, okay, they got to strike quicker now to make up for it. Let's go. And then they start maybe forcing turnovers or forcing things that aren't there. So I just look at it as a basic, just keep running into them. Notre Dame is one of only 3, I believe, Power 5 teams who have had time of possession over 36 minutes in 3 different games this year. I think 4 teams there. 7 of the 8 games, they dominated the time of possession. And when you have a prolific offense you're going against like that, the best thing you can do is just keep them off the field as much as you can.
I have no doubt that what Notre Dame wants to do is exactly what you just said. Like, they're not going away from anything that got them to where they are. I agree with you there. Well, how I'm kind of taking the question, and this is the one thing I've been curious about, is I don't know that they've had a game that has forced you to do anything other than that, or force you where you can't say, oh yeah, we're cool if this takes 7 minutes to score a touchdown. Like even Clemson, like you would have thought that might be one, but they go up, 20 to 10, or I don't remember the exact score. They went up early, and the game script dictated they could do what they wanted until, of course, that final drive. So I've just kind of been curious or wondering if we'll see a game where Notre Dame falls behind early or later, or falls behind by multiple scores or anything, where their hand is kind of forced, or basically how much positive game script while you're leading or early game, tie game dependent is what they've done this year. So, and I think we've learned enough in recent weeks that if they are forced to throw it a lot or score quicker, that they can move the ball effectively through the air. We've seen that in the last couple of games. But that's just kind of one thing I'm curious about, not necessarily in a bad way or skeptic where, oh, no, this really could expose them. But, I mean, in almost every game, we've seen Notre Dame win the toss and want the ball, or defer and get the ball and just go and score. Like they had scored 4 straight touchdowns on the opening drive until Boston College, still got a field goal. So you're pretty much looking at, all right, they're ahead every time. What if they don't win the toss and North Carolina wants the ball? Or, I mean, like, it's a little bit dependent on just the pure luck of what the coin toss does, just as far as, okay, what the opening drive sets. And obviously an opponent touchdown on that isn't making you scrap everything and get scared. But yeah, I'm just kind of curious if there's a point in this season or a point in this game where they can't be quite as methodical or take their time or ball control, where you think, all right, they've got to get a couple of touchdowns or they've got to make up a couple of scores in a multi-score deficit here. And North Carolina, I think, just presents that unique challenge in that, all right, it could take, 5 minutes of game time and they've put up 2 scores, and in a way that maybe some others couldn't do, or Clemson certainly capable of doing, just wasn't able to do in that game.
Yeah, and that's a very good point there, Patrick. Is Notre Dame has played a possible 480 regulation minutes this year. I'm not including the 2 overtimes against Clemson. And out of those 480 minutes, they've trailed, I think, only 24 minutes out of there. And it's not been by more than 1 score. In fact, they've answered right away, usually in those situations. So, what if you suddenly are down, I don't know, or 14-0? How do you respond? I think if it's early on, they stick with it. I don't think they'll lose that patience, that identity. If it gets to the second half, well, maybe that becomes a problem. But that's part of what makes you the number 2 team and a front runner for the cutoff is that you are pretty much controls what you do.
Let's go to bold. Let's go to bold prediction time. We'll go to Patrick first. Give us something good. Give us your bold prediction for the game.
I've got something that always keeps the podcast spicy. So here's what I'm going to go with. North Carolina allows more rushing yards than it gains. And I know maybe you think, well, duh, if Notre Dame wins, that might be the case. But I'll frame it like this. The differential in yards allowed, rushing yards allowed, and rushing yards gained. Here's what they are for both teams. Notre Dame, 233 per game gained, allowed, 85.1. That's a difference of, let me do the math off the top of my head, or even just pull up the quick calculator here. 149 yards on average. They are outgaining their opponent on the ground. North Carolina, same thing. 233.5 gained, 152 given up. That's what, about 80? So you just look at the difference in what the ground game gives you when you factor in what your opponent's getting in that. And I think this is a stat that more so just shows how good Notre Dame is at controlling the line of scrimmage on both ends. Like if you want a number just to illustrate physicality and ability to win up front, rushing yard differential per game is a pretty good one. So North Carolina in that area has been a lot worse than Notre Dame. So I think that we'll see a situation that, that yardage differential is negative for North Carolina in terms of what they give up on the ground, just because I think Notre Dame's going to still be able to control up front.
Lou, you got a bold prediction for us?
Well, remember before the Louisville game how everyone was talking about, boy, this is going to be a shootout here. That's two really good offenses there. There's going to be a lot of points scored here, both teams in the 30s, and the final score ends up 12-7.
So Lou's hitting the under. Okay.
And then, it's like the next, boy, this Pitt game is going to be close. Pitt's history against Notre Dame, and boy, they didn't look good against Louisville and that, and Notre Dame blows their doors off 45-3. So North Carolina's been averaging 48 points a game the last 6, 43.4 for the season. So I think they'll be under 30 against Notre Dame. And Notre Dame is looking for only the second time in its history, or in the last 100 years, let's say, of reaching 45 points for the third consecutive game, minimum 45 points. The only other time was with Lou Holtz's last season in 1996 when they did it 4 straight. So I don't want to give away my prediction here, but we'll get to that. But I don't think it's necessarily bold, but I anticipate a lot of people are expecting a shootout, and I'm expecting Clark Lee and company to hold North Carolina under 30 points. Going into that Boston College game, in this 32 games that Clark Lee had been in here, there's only one game where Notre Dame allowed more than 30 points, and now they've allowed 30 points in back-to-back games. The Boston College game, 45-31, wasn't as close as the indicator. So I don't see it happening a third straight week.
Well, let's get right into score predictions. We'll Blue, you think Notre Dame holds North Carolina to under 30 points? How many does Notre Dame score, though?
The score I was thinking of waking up 45-31. I said, wait a second, that was a score against Boston College the last time out. So I'm going to go with something like 42-28, 42-27, right in that area.
All right. I am going with, I won't quite go under 30, but I can pick up on that to a degree. I'm going Notre Dame 48, North Carolina 34. I have no reason to buy into North Carolina's ability to stop anybody or Notre Dame, or at least not allow chunk plays. I mean, if you look at the point totals, the yardage numbers, their yards per play or just some defensive numbers are a little bit better than you'd expect from a team giving up, whatever the raw point total is, somewhere in the 40s, I think. But yeah, I'm gonna take North Carolina to go over 30 here. And even if it's a shootout that Notre Dame just has more juice left and pulls away late, or it's a thing where it's like that USC game last year where, okay, they're flustered for 2+ quarters and then sort of mount a comeback when you're one-dimensional or you're getting prevent or whatever. North Carolina is still, I think, good enough to go over 30 if it's in that situation. Or, I mean, who knows, if it's in stinky trash garbage time and the game is decided well before that. I'm not sure that's going to be the case. But yeah, 48-34 Notre Dame.
All right, we are going to take some questions from our YouTube live audience. Sean Davis, we appreciate the super chat, man. We've got a lot of Jordan Johnson talk going on in the comments of our YouTube live chat here. Sean says, is this the week where Jordan Johnson catches the touchdown pass? Sean, let's just see if Jordan Johnson gets a snap before we start talking about touchdown catches. So, Patrick, what do the people need to be thinking about Jordan Johnson right now?
Don't be. I'm just gonna put it that simple. Like, I know he got an entire drive in non-garbage time against Boston College.
That's right. That's right.
3 snaps elsewhere earlier in the game, 0 targets. And look, if it goes back to what we said about Braden Lindsay, like if it's hard to fit him in, and let's just assume for a minute, just for the sake of this, that he's healthy and he can play or he can do what his skill set advertises he can do. If we're talking about that's hard to fit in, can we really fit in a freshman who still seems to, and I'm just observing from what we've seen, this isn't my take on what should or shouldn't happen, who's still trying to earn the coach's trust? I doubt it. I wouldn't expect much unless, again, there's stinky trash garbage time in the entire fourth quarter and the backups are in. But I'm not going to predict that to happen. I don't think North Carolina's that bad. In fact, I think they're pretty good.
There's just a lot of, we'll pop up Air Pro K's question or comment here. I watch college football and freshmen are making an impact everywhere. You recruit these kids, and all of a sudden traits are surprised you. So it's not like Notre Dame's not playing freshmen. I mean, the number 2 back, Chris Tyree, seen a ton of the field. Michael Mayer,
that guy.
What an impact he's had. Clarence Lewis. Guys, you remember our most important or top 25 most important players list? Lou, do you remember where we had Tariq Bracy? I want to say it was top 4 or number 4 or 5.
I think it was. Maybe it was.
Yeah, I want to say
top 10 for sure.
Yeah. So, and here's Clarence Lewis starting over. So this whole thing of Notre Dame is not playing freshmen just does not make any sense to me whatsoever.
He's not playing the freshman you want to see. Because that idea of the receivers from September is still sticking in the head. And look, I would have played Jordan Johnson in September. I've said that. I've been on the record with that and everything. And I just don't see a need to right now. I mean, again, who are you taking snaps away from? I'm not sure.
We'll go to David Thompson, who asks, could you imagine this secondary without Nick Mcloud? What a huge pickup this offseason. He's been an unsung hero. Yeah, we don't talk about Nick Mcloud a ton. You know why? Because he's just making plays and not getting beat much. So, Lou, what would this, like we talk about most valuable, right? Well, if you take this person away, what's the impact? What if you took Nick Mcloud away?
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the most underrated. He may be the most underrated player or unappreciated as far as what he's been able to do, because that also gave them the luxury of moving Sean Crawford to the safety position, where he originally was supposed to be a play holder or a placeholder, as they called it. So the impact he's had at that boundary position, where you had a consensus All-America 2 years ago with Julian Love. You had another top drafted player there in the 4th round who's playing for Carolina, Troy Pride, last year. And to bring him in and having the type of impact that he's been able to make, where you're able to rotate Tariq and Clarence Lewis on the other side, that's given him such a luxury because you don't know then with Sean Crawford, how would he have fared? And with the overall secondary, it's a chain reaction because now with Mcloud ensconced there, you're able to move. You have that luxury of moving Crawford to the safety position. And that's just been so beneficial. And look, just going back to the Jordan Johnson one thing here, if you get the trust and you're good enough, you're going to be playing. There's no conspiracy theory. Michael Mayer is having an unbelievable year as a freshman there. Clarence Lewis is playing. Everyone expected Chris Tyree to play, and he's playing. If you earn the trust, and this goes beyond just what you do on the football, you're going to play. I mean, Kavari Russell, my gosh, that 2012 team that went unbeaten, he came in as a running back and as a slot. It's like, okay, we need a corner. Who do we get it? Who's the best guy? They put Kavari Russell there, and he makes freshman All-American. Aaron Lynch makes freshman All-America the year prior to that. Alizé Mack plays as a tight end and makes some huge catches. People are out there. If you're ready to play, I don't get it. Notre Dame is number 2 in the country for a reason. People talk about, well, I see these freshmen all over them. Well, where are they ranked? This is part of making a great program is your seniors, your upperclassmen are developed to the point where playing freshmen is a luxury, not a necessity. And you have to really, really earn it. And guys like Mayer and Tyree and Lewis, they earn it.
Lou, I love when you ran. It's just impassioned and it hits all the right notes. I mean, I agree. I mean, like look, like I said, I would have played him early on, and I couldn't agree more. And just for a minute to just read the Mcloud stats here, 19 catches on 39 balls thrown his way. That's under 50%. Maybe the only thing that would get you talking about him more is if he catches a couple more interceptions. But like what? That's the only thing you can really nitpick, right? I mean, he's been really steady over there. I've been impressed with his run defense and his tackling. Yeah, I would not really want to think too much about what that would look like without him.
Another question here. Corey D says, why isn't Lawrence Keys playing more? Guys, I just want to, before we throw this to Patrick, whether Patrick or Lou like this or not, this is a pro Avery Davis show and podcast. I love Avery Davis. I've said this on Twitter. I've said this on our website. I think Avery Davis is going to find himself playing in the NFL. He's such a smooth slot receiver. Everything he does just seems easy. So, Patrick, are you on this Avery Davis train as I am? I mean, Brian Kelly has raved about Lawrence Keys, but Avery Davis is just playing so freaking well. I don't know how you'd take him out.
I wouldn't, and yeah, I'm with you. I've been impressed with his yards after catch ability and what he gives you there. I mean, and really just to have the mental fortitude to stick with it after all these positional moves. And to Lawrence Keys, he's a slot receiver. Avery Davis is a slot receiver. This isn't the air raid where you're playing 2 of those guys at the same time, or a situation where you're taking a tight end off the field at any point. I think, and I have the numbers on this, but not off the top of my head, Notre Dame has had like 2 plays all year without the tight end in there at all. So like they're right off the bat, there's just a like snap, and I don't know what the right term for it is, like formational philosophy. You know what I mean? That you're just not going to have that many snaps available for slot receivers. But I mean, we saw Keys last week. I mean, obviously worth mentioning, he had a concussion he was working back from, but he caught 2 passes. Almost had a third. It was a really well-placed deep ball from Book that he just couldn't quite bring in. And I think he was so I mentioned earlier in the show, no one outside of that main kind of trio has caught more than 2 passes since Lindsay against Florida State. Keys was the first of anyone not in that group to catch more than 1 pass when he was at Boston College last week. So there's a little bit of a role for him. But yeah, I mean, look, Avery Davis and just what he's given you, that's going to cut into the upside just as far as the raw snap number for Lawrence.
Yeah, It's three very simple answers. One, Lawrence has been injured a good portion of this year and has had other health setbacks, including concussion protocol. Two, Avery Davis is playing better football right now. And three, formationally, they're going to go with more than two, sometimes three tight ends, which brings the slot out. I mean, there's 11 guys you can put on the field. You have to put on a quarterback. You have to put on 5 offensive linemen. So it limits the number of people who can be on the field.
Well, that is going to do it for our second Irish Huddle Live. We appreciate everyone who's joined us live. We appreciate everyone watching this back or listening via podcast format as well. We've got a lot of exciting stuff going on at blueandgold.com. Again, use that promo code Nike75 if you're not subscribed to our website. That gets you a $75 Nike gift card when you use the promo code to use online or in stores. And it gets you 25% off the first year of your blueandgold.com subscription. Please like, please subscribe. And that'll do it for this show. Make sure to join us 15 minutes after the conclusion of Notre Dame's game against North Carolina. Myself and Mike Goolsby will be live to break down the show.